Hello, all, and welcome to another week and another theory. This theory that we're going to talk about today was originally created. There's a number of theories that kind of are part of neurobiology and family therapy. But the one that we'll talk mostly about today, which is polyvagal theory, was created by somebody who is not actually a therapist, but it's been really influential in doing all kinds of psychotherapy. And so it was kind of pulled in and is used because the people in families are humans. And this is about human physiology and neurobiology. It's pulled in and used in family therapy also. And so this model is a little bit different than other ones we've looked at before. Instead of kind of looking from the outside in, this model looks more from the inside of an individual person out. And it does look at some of the systemic features of our autonomic nervous system. We usually think of like our physiology as being kind of self-contained. But one of the things that Stephen Porges, who is the creator of polyvagal theory, pointed out is that we actually have mechanisms within our neurophysiology that allow us to be socially connected, and that actually make it quite important for us to be socially connected because that's an important source of regulation. So, like I said, there's a couple of other ones in doing therapy. I also use one called interpersonal neurobiology, which is fascinating and wonderful. I'm not going to go over it very much here. Any of you who are reading books by Dan Siegel this semester will have some kind of idea about interpersonal neurobiology because that's the basis of kind of the theoretical foundation for his books. And interpersonal neurobiology kind of has more to do with, in the brain, particular systems and functions of various organs in the brain. But then also he has kind of a broader idea of mind, kind of brain or embodied brain, and then relationships. And he looks at how all of those are kind of part of a system of information and energy flow. So that's a wonderful theory, but we're not going to go over that particularly today. If you're interested in it, of course, feel free to read. So we are wired to connect. That is a really central premise in polyvagal theory. And like I said, Stephen Porges, the gentleman on the right there, is the creator of this theory. And Deb Dana, she took the theory and worked with Dr. Porges and put it into kind of a therapeutic context. And so hers is the book that you will have read from for this week. Anyway, Stephen Porges does do some psychology, but looks more. So psychology, as I mentioned earlier in the course, has kind of become very focused on individual and on neurobiology and things like that, which is wonderful and fascinating. Not always as applicable for families. And of course, there's this desire for it, to take what is found in these more research-based psychological venues and put them into therapy. But sometimes psychologists are just curious about what's going on and looking at various neurophysiological kind of components of experiencing and what is happening, and don't always translate into therapy. So we luckily have had this translated into therapy by Mrs., I guess, Deb Dana. She's a licensed clinical social worker. So one of the important implications of polyvagal theory is for therapists. And this quote, I really appreciated. It really goes along well with our idea of self of the therapist and needing to be regulated and to create safety for the people, the clients that we are working with. So it says, while training in models of therapy is important, at its heart, this work, meaning the work of being a therapist and of helping people make changes, is about our ability to show up for our clients as a regulated and regulating resource. In all of the many forms our work takes, we are asked to walk with others on their pathways to healing. We accept the responsibility of being a predictably safe, co-regulating person for our clients. And to do this requires we regulate our own mind-body system. Understanding that our autonomic nervous system is in a continual state of signaling and searching for cues of safety, we must be able to answer the question, what message is my nervous system sending? And be able to offer our clients the energy of ventral vagal safety and connection. So as a therapist, of course, we want to be safe and present, and doing some of that self of the therapist work and being self-reflective is really important. So maybe in the course of therapy, you're working with somebody and you notice yourself start to get a little flooded, that sympathetic nervous system response kicks on, which we'll talk about more in a little bit. At that point, you have to have done enough self-work to recognize it and to be kind of reflective and calm about, like, to be able to say, okay, this is what's happening, and now what do I need to do to regulate myself, instead of then having that come into the therapeutic practice and dysregulate or make unsafe the situation. All right, so overview. You will have read about some of this, or maybe you're watching this before you have read. So the autonomic nervous system is part of just our self-regulatory system. It's got two components, the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. And the sympathetic nervous system we associate with fight and flight. Maybe you guys already know that other things have been added to that. We talk about fight, flight, fawn, which means to base, it's like if you imagine a dog rolling on its tummy, or sorry, rolling so its tummy is up. So the dog, you know, if the dog is confronted with another dog that is kind of in an attacking stance, the dog can fight it, it could run away, or it could roll over on its back and show its belly and be like, look, I'm no threat, don't fight me. Another one that has been found is find. So, you know, if maybe, well, for example, I went snorkeling with my husband one time, and we were over a reef and a big shark came swimming right up to us. And I was like, and then I like looked quickly for my husband. Where's my husband? Because he's kind of my safety source. So that's the find component. So fight, flight, fawn, or flee. No, wait, fight, flight, flee is flight, fawn or find. Okay, there we go. So parasympathetic is the rest, digest, connect system. So if you think about sympathetic as being like, go, action, do something, parasympathetic is like, calm it down, chill out. And so we talk about the parasympathetic system as being a brake, like putting on the brakes for the sympathetic nervous system. And parasympathetic has this, and this is the important part of the polyvagal theory, is kind of wired to the brain, connected through the vagal nerve, which is the 10th cranial nerve. And the vagal nerve, as it turns out, has two different parts, which is why the theory is called polyvagal, because there's two of them. So there's a ventral vagal, which is the newer kind of part or evolved part of the vagus nerve. And then there's the dorsal vagal. And dorsal vagal is present in like pretty much all animals. Dorsal vagal will shut an animal down to the point of a hard freeze. So we talk about freeze sometimes a little bit with sympathetic, like kind of this gasp or whatever. But a hard freeze is like playing dead. It's like you kind of disconnect. If you think about dissociating in a trauma, that would be an example of a hard freeze. So that's dorsal vagal. Ventral vagal is the newer kind of evolved aspect of that, or the branch of the vagal nerve. And that regulates, it regulates our social communication system, basically. And this is an important part of polyvagal, is that we have this branch of the vagus nerve that puts us in a state to safely communicate with and interact with other people. And that's a really important part of our social mechanism. And so mammals have this ventral vagal branch. And so ventral vagal connects to our heart and lungs and stomach, and also connects to nerves in our throat and face and eyes. So when somebody is calm and relaxed, assuming they're being authentic, really are calm and relaxed, not just acting like it, you can see that in the way their face is, the way their voice is. Sometimes you think, if somebody is really safe, their voice may get a little deeper. If somebody is really excited or tense or nervous or scared, it might get a little bit higher. So we get these cues from each other about, am I safe? Am I not safe? And this isn't really part of the model. It is, but not part of what we've talked about or what you would have read about, which is that because of trauma, people can misidentify cues, or they can see kind of a neutral look and begin to see that as unsafe. Or sometimes because of trauma, a connecting stance actually gets interpreted as unsafe because that might have been some of the behaviors of a perpetrator. So trauma can change some of this wiring, but what we're talking about is general functioning. So when parasympathetic system is online, so that sympathetic nervous system is kind of depressed, there's that vagal brake, meaning like putting on the brakes. Vagal brake is for the parasympathetic nervous system. Then our pupils constrict. Our salivation is enhanced because this is rest and digest, right? Or we're just going to be digesting. We're chill, like sitting around the dinner table, talking, laughing, digesting. Heart rate actually goes down. Digestion is enhanced. Our heart rate variability, which means kind of how regimented our heart rate is. So for example, there's some variability all the time, but you have a pretty consistent ka-chunk, 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 ka-chunk. But when we're relaxed, there's just a little bit more kind of rhythmic irregularity. If you think about maybe a camp of soldiers, and in a time when there's no conflict, there's no battle, nothing's going on, they may be kind of milling around, there's not a lot of order, kind of chill. And if there is battle, or there's a incoming or whatever, everybody snaps to attention, goes to their stations, is like doing their thing really in a regimented way. Heartbeat does the same thing. So if we're relaxed, that heart rate variability increases. We're like, maybe here, maybe there, whatever, we're variable. When we get stressed and sympathetic nervous system kicks on, then the heart rate variability decreases and it's much more regimented. Also, immunity and neural functioning is better regulated. So when we are relaxed, our immune system is online and doing its stuff. When we get stressed, our body, and this is just because of the way we've evolved, this whole system, autonomic nervous system, is about keeping us alive. And so Of course, if we are in a situation that we interpret or our brain interprets as dangerous, then the main goal is keep this person alive. And so if the danger is like short term right now, all of the resources go to activation, like pupils dilate. So like, oh, we can, I'm looking, I'm seeing, I'm pulling in all the energy, all of the information. Saliva and any kind of digestion is inhibited because that's not the priority right now. Heart rate increases. Like I said, heart rate variability decreases. We're like right in step. Digestion is inhibited again because it takes blood and resources to digest, and that's not the priority right now. And then there's kind of our immune response and neurological dysregulation, meaning the priority isn't our higher cognitive functions, and the priority isn't our immune response. The priority is stay alive right now. And so the thinking kind of adjusts to a different part of the brain. Dan Siegel, interpersonal neurobiology, calls it the downstairs brain. It's a more primitive part of the brain. And so we're not thinking about like all of the various possibilities. Like, for example, if a lion jumps in front of you, you don't want to be contemplating the various possibilities before you do anything. You want to just do something really quickly to get yourself out of harm's way. So our higher cognitive functions are offline. And this is really important, and we'll talk about it more later, when you're dealing with a couple or a family. And if they are in this conflict state, so that you can see their sympathetic nervous system is what's engaged right now, and they're not in this rest, digest, connect, calm, safe state, you can expect that they are not going to be using the logical higher parts of their brain. Okay, so polyvagal theory points towards an adaptive response in life-threatening situations as part of this emergency sympathetic response. So that is the dorsal vagal. And dorsal vagal is also, so the whole vagal nerve is part of parasympathetic, puts the brake on sympathetic. But the dorsal vagal, like I said, is a much more of a shutdown than parasympathetic. So parasympathetic, like things kind of calm down, but dorsal vagal, like we're going into play dead, it's a deep freeze state, hard freeze, immobilization. So let's see here. It says again, evolution of mammals still includes the reptilian responses, such as the response to play dead or to defecate in life or death situations, which is not considered a sympathetic. So that's not considered the fight, flight, fawn, find. Although if it's possible to do the sympathetic and that will keep you alive, then that's kind of the route your body will go. But if it looks like it's too much, I can't handle, like there's just nothing I can do, then it kicks into that dorsal vagal. So on the right here, we have ventral vagal complex, which is the signaling system for motion and motion communication, our social engagement system, sympathetic nervous system, mobilization system for that fight, flight, fawn, and find, and sometimes can be a soft freeze, which is our aggressive, our defensive system. And then dorsal vagal is the immobilization. It's passive. It's I protect myself by just playing dead or just completely withdrawing or dissociating. And then you can see here at the bottom right, this map of polyvagal states, and we'll actually look at several other iterations of this too. But so the vagus nerve wanders around the body. It's actually called vagus because vagus vagal, I guess vagus means to wander or wandering. So that vagal nerve wanders, it's the vagus. And it wanders through and innervates, meaning it it innervates means it gives nerves to, or it gives signals to the various organs of our body. And also, like I said, connected to nerves of our throat and face. So when there's different levels of arousal, that low level of arousal, because it's safe, the safety, we're in ventral vagal, that newer aspect of the vagal nerve, the newer branch. And then sympathetic, we've gone, or the sympathetic arousal. So that's like, this is scary, I better do something about it. That's where we've got sympathetic nervous system. And then dorsal vagal, it's like, it's so bad, I can't do anything about it. And that's the shutdown. Okay, I hope all that made sense. Feel free to write down any questions you have, and I'll answer them in the lab, or you can email me. So this is the autonomic ladder. And of course, you will have seen this in the reading. So she has dorsal vagal down low, and then sympathetic is kind of mid-range. I'm in danger, I need to do something about it. Ventral vagal is I feel connected, I'm in a good spot, I feel safe. And so looking at where people are autonomically on this ladder helps people understand themselves, understand why they're responding to like their family members or to each other, a couple, the way they are. Sometimes it helps people understand why they're responding to you as a therapist the way they are. And so as we put polyvagal theory into therapy, that's what we're looking at. We're trying to understand what's going on with this person. Why is that maybe going on? Maybe it's really obvious, but maybe it's not. And so helping people identify what's going on, be aware of it with some compassion, and then find ways to calm themselves down and to recognize what is triggering that state can be really helpful. So I said we'd look at another couple of versions of this kind of map of activation. So low activation, again, is that neuroception of safety. And neuroception means what we are perceiving based on our sense of our own felt body, like how we feel, and also what we see in the other person. And neuroception isn't something we do consciously. I mean, maybe we could do it consciously. And it's something that this therapeutic model will help us bring more intention and consciousness to, in terms of our own sense, which is more interoception. Interoception is like your own felt sense of self, and neuroception is how is what I'm seeing kind of reflected in me, and how do I get a sense of safety or threat from that? So if there's this sense of things are safe, what I'm seeing from the other person is safe, how I'm feeling is safe, that's this neuroception of safety. They put freedom, food, fun, and friends. Almost sounds like a McDonald's commercial. Anyway, so that's this exploratory, I'm safe, I'm connected, I can get a sense of myself, past, present, connection. Parasympathetic nervous system is what's going on here. So it says their brake system, the ventral vagal dominance, which is the social engagement, or parasympathetic can also be dorsal vagal, although when there's this low arousal, there's a sense of safety, that's going to be ventral vagal. These states are the most conducive to relationships, resting, repair, meaning like immune response and healing, restoration. The felt sense of safety supports sleeping, reading, meditation, prayer, eating, as well as healthy social interactions, exploration, learning, procreation, meaning sex. You've got, sometimes people come in and are like, I don't know why I have no interest in sex, or it's really hard to get aroused, or I can't come to an orgasm. A lot of times that's going to be because the relationship does not feel safe to you right now. And if the relationship does not feel safe, you are not in a good autonomic state to be engaging in sex. And so maybe we'll do some things to help the relationship feel safer. And then that can, and not always, but often will naturally the sex will come as a part of that, the relationship feeling closer and safer and more intimate. And so it's easier to just relax and engage. As well as other, let's see here, and play also. The more active these states involves a degree of tolerable or pleasurable sympathetic arousal. So we can get in that I feel safe, but maybe there's like some friendly competition, or maybe there is, I don't know, I mean, some people like kind of the thrill of bungee jumping or riding a roller coaster, because there's both that sense of safety, like I'm strapped into the roller coaster and I'm hooked up well on this bungee jumping, but there's also that kind of excitement of the sympathetic, because your body is also like, oh, what's happening? So then the next level of activation, this neuroception of danger. So it's like something in my environment is not safe right now. And of course, because we are social creatures, part of what can be not safe is the social situation. It can feel not safe to not feel accepted by your parents or by your spouse or by friends or by a professor or whatever it is. That feels unsafe and can put you into this sympathetic nervous system response. So there is the find, fawn, flee, or fight. Let's say, I hope you guys don't have this experience, but you know, it happens a fair amount in college. Let's say you have a professor who feels pretty overwhelming to you, maybe is dismissive or gives you way more than you feel like you can possibly do. If that's the case in this class, I hope you'll tell me. Anyway, so you have several options. Maybe, you know, you've got this kind of overlying sense of the class isn't safe and the professor is not safe. And then maybe you fail a test and you look back through the test and it looks like you did get some things right and the professor didn't give you the grade you deserved. So what are you going to do about it? Maybe it's too overwhelming, and we'll talk about this, and so you do nothing and you just are like, oh well, I guess I can't do anything. Maybe it's tolerable to go and talk to the professor and kind of fight for your grade. Now, if you want to have the best response from your professor, you probably won't come in with an attacking, fighting stance. But for the sake of this example, maybe you want to say, hey, and be kind of aggressive. I saw that you took points off for this and that wasn't right because this, you know, this is what I read. I can go back and look at my notes and it clearly said this and that's what I put and I don't know why you took it off. So flee would also be like, I do nothing, I pull back. Could be that total shutdown. Fawn would be like, oh, you're such a wonderful professor. I'm so grateful for you. Hey, I appreciate everything that you've taught me. And gee, I wondered about this one thing. That would be fawning. Find would be, I don't know how to deal with this, but maybe maybe you have a parent who's kind of a helicopter parent who is still intervening for you in college. So maybe you go find your parent and say, you need to email this professor and tell them that that their class isn't okay and they gave me a bad grade they shouldn't have. That would probably be the least viable option. I would say don't go for that one. But that's kind of an example of what might happen for these different kind of possibilities, these different strategies that could be used in that sympathetic nervous system response. So there's defensive orientation. There's a sense of, I can do something. I'm going to go figure out how to do something. So there's that mobilization. And there's various degrees of presence and connection. So It's possible, if you're kind of at a lower state of this arousal, to still be able to talk about something, to still be able to work on something or try to connect about something. But as you get higher and higher on this arousal level, there's less and less ability, because you're, like I said, the higher functions of your brain, that reasoning and logic and processing and being able to consider the whole context and your part and the other person's part, who are, kind of talking about these satir coping stances, right? That's not an option anymore. Yeah. So as you get higher up, that sense of presence and connection is just goes away. And you kind of have to do one of these coping stances. One of the strategies, the find, fawn, flee, or fight. So I kind of already described, you can see there on the right, it describes the find, fawn, flee, and fight again. And then the highest level of threat is this freeze, fold, faint, feign death, fragment. Fragment as in we dissociate. For example, in complex PTSD, where there's been trauma and trauma and trauma, people might dissociate and begin to have dissociative identity disorder. Like they can't deal with it all. And so they fragment into different parts. So that parasympathetic, it's also the break, it slows everything down. But now this is dorsal vagal dominance. Meaning it's that more primitive branch of the vagus nerve. And it's a high tone. So vagal tone is, if you imagine, I'm not sure this is really how the brakes work, but if you imagine a brake line, and if you have a car in neutral, assuming you have an automatic transmission, if you have a car in neutral, it's just going to kind of maybe slowly move forward, just kind of at a walking pace. Obviously a car's not walking, but kind of at a walking pace. If you put the brake on at that point, it will stop. So that would be parasympathetic, the ventral vagal parasympathetic, where you're putting on a brake a little bit. So that vagal tone, the parasympathetic system is connected through the vagus nerve. So the vagal tone with the ventral vagal will put a stop on that moving forward, which is kind of like the low level sympathetic response that we always need to have some sort of activation. Then in that sympathetic nervous system, it's like putting on the gas, so that what is the kind of normal energy forward gets accelerated. And then with parasympathetic, it's a high vagal tone. So it's like slamming on the brakes. And that then is the dorsal vagal. I'm going like this because dorsal is like in the back, ventral is in the front. Anyway, so that is dorsal vagal, and that will kind of shut everything down. All right, so here's one more kind of look at this as arousal increases. So the bottom, again, that's the ventral vagal, social engagement, connection, safety, oriented to the environment. This is the state that you need to be in to consider and to have congruent communication, where you can consider your part, and you can consider the other person's part, and you can consider the context, and you consider the whole system. And you can be in these higher level functioning parts of your brain, prefrontal cortex, and really activating through the corpus callosum, having the two sides of your brain be firing and connecting to each other. There's joy, you can be really present in those moments, a sense of groundedness, curiosity, of compassion, of calm, connection, all of those things. And those C words, remember those C words. We will be using them next week also with internal family systems. That curiosity, compassion, connection, calm. There's also creativity, confidence, all of those things. We'll talk about them more later. So then you get up into the sympathetic. There's that flight, fight, also fawn, find, where there is worry and concern, frustration, irritation, anxiety, anger, fear, panic, rage. And like all of that, you might like it, you're getting bigger and, you know, more and more activated, but you still feel like you can do something about it until you cross over into that dorsal vagal. That's, this is beyond me. I can't do anything. There's dissociation, numbness, depression, that conservation of energy, just kind of feeling shut down, feeling helpless. Shame can put people into this, where like if they feel like they're just a worthless person in general, then why even defend themselves? You know, what they've gone past the sympathetic and they just shut down. There's hopelessness, preparation for death. Interestingly, in this, you might not feel, so that kind of numbness in animals. So for example, if, I don't know, a cheetah or a lion is chasing an antelope, you know, right? It's like the antelope run, but if the antelope realizes it can't run anymore and it's caught, it's done for, it will go limp and just be dead, and it's pretend to be dead or act dead. And it seems to be that the nervous system in terms of like feeling pain also kind of shuts down, like you dissociate, and an animal may dissociate. So that, of course, if you're about to be eaten, it will not be quite so painful, right? So everything just shuts down, kind of dissociate, like you're not there. Well, if by chance that predator then gets distracted or walks away, the animal can shake itself off and run away. We don't do quite as good of a job of that usually. When we get into that freeze, we have a much harder time of shaking it off and running away. And those kind of impulses for shame and shutdown and hopelessness and dissociation and numbness, all of those things are just hard to shake. And they kind of get to be part of our neural pathways that we go down pretty frequently. So also another interesting thing about this is when people get into that sympathetic or even the dorsal vagal freeze, because of kind of constant trauma, like you've probably heard this analogy of like, you want a sympathetic response when you're confronted with a bear in the woods. But if the bear goes home with you and you are always at that level of activation, it has really serious consequences, because of course, when you're always afraid for your life, or there's always this neuroception of danger, some of those things that we talked about, like immune system response and healing and digestion and all of those things, are not the top priority. And as that becomes chronic, it can lead to some real problems. Our gene expression changes, our immune system can be depressed, we don't digest very well, may gain weight, or not feel like eating at all. All of these not pleasant things happen, and that's because of what's going on in our autonomic nervous system. Okay, window of tolerance. So window of tolerance is the kind of the area in which there is enough comfort, enough safety to be able to deal productively with whatever is happening and to be able to connect with somebody. Now, when I say deal productively, obviously, if a bear comes into the room, the productive thing is to run away. But if your spouse comes into the room and yells at you, maybe you have the same response and want to run away, but that's not actually going to be productive for the relationship, because we're trying to build a relationship here. So that window of tolerance, there's a state of optimum arousal. So the parasympathetic nervous system is stimulated with that ventral vagal branch. There's deceleration of the sympathetic response. The body is well regulated, emotions are tolerated, information is integrated. you can have compassion there and feel calm and get the context, have clarity about the context, about all of these things in this optimum kind of arousal window. When there is this shutdown, like I'm depressed, I'm dissociating, that's not optimal window, obviously. I have people come into sessions sometimes where they are in a state of shame or a state of depression such that they won't make eye contact, or I may ask them a question or something and they're just kind of always like that, just hunched over, off somewhere else, not present in session. And so we really have to address that, and try to help people feel a little safer, at least in the sphere of therapy and in that therapeutic relationship, so that they can get into that window where it's safe to learn and to be activating that prefrontal cortex and to be engaging with me as a person and with their spouse and maybe with their children, and to be acknowledging their emotions, where learning can happen. So of course, if they're shut down, we're not going to be learning anything. Similarly, if a couple comes in and they're super activated and they're like looking at me and looking at each other, but they're yelling and they're like, can't you tell him that he's, oh, what have I heard? So many things. Usually narcissistic, that's the catch-all. And then there's so much, again, we're not learning anything right now. The experience that's happening is just reinforcing the same pattern. So again, helping the people now, instead of bring up the energy, we're going to help people bring down the energy. That's going to be important to be able to make progress in session. Which is not to say that having some yelling and engagement at that level is a bad thing. In fact, that's something that I kind of appreciate seeing to some extent in therapy, because then I can say, I think your guys are showing me what happens at home. Am I getting that right? And then as I kind of take the meta level and help them see this meta level, oh, the same pattern, the same cycle that happens at home is happening right now, then that kind of can help them calm down. We can talk about how they're feeling in that moment. It can be experiential. We can do some exercises in the moment to help them calm down and regulate. And we'll get to some more of these interventions. But that can be an experiential opportunity also. Okay, so now putting all of this into therapy. I mean, we've talked a little bit about how it fits into therapy, but in the reading, it talks about this personal profile map. And this is about interoception, meaning our ability to recognize our own internal sensations. So we maybe think about sensation as like heat and cool and pressure and textures and things like that. But there are internal sensations that we can obviously cue into also. Like, am I feeling nervous? Is my throat tight? Is my stomach clenched? Are there butterflies? Am I jittery? All of these things. And a lot of times people kind of go on automatic pilot and they are reacting to these feelings, but don't even realize they're reacting because they're not noticing them. They're not understanding what's happening. And so a big part of therapy can be helping people slow the process down and understand what's going on within them. So for the sympathetic nervous system, that will be in the middle. Remember a time, and this is just helping people start to get a sense of themselves, start to get a sense of knowing what their body feels like in these states and recognizing it. Remember a time you felt the sense of sympathetic mobilizing energy moving through you. You probably wouldn't actually say that unless you had done a lot of psychoeducation to say what sympathetic mobilizing energy is. You would probably just say a time when you felt scared, you felt like things weren't safe. Maybe when your husband yelled at you, although that might have put them into that dorsal vagal shutdown state instead. But sometime when you felt like running away or fighting, or you had to kind of be super nice. So that time when you had too much energy flooding your system, the sense of anxiety, maybe being a little overwhelmed, you feel like one more thing, I can't handle one more thing, it's too much. And then as you kind of have somebody kind of remember that, then they can start to practice that interoception. How am I feeling? What's going on in my body? And in this personal profile map, they might write down sensations. They might write down where they're feeling it. They might use colors. They can be creative about it, of course. Dorsal vagal then is that sense of collapse, the sense of shame or dissociation. There's not enough energy to run the system. If you were in a room full of people, it might feel as if there was a plexiglass shield between you and them. It's just like nada, just nothing there. You couldn't reach people. It's like you're just cut off. It might feel like depression. It's hard to feel hope. And then as people maybe remember a time they felt like that, they can write about that, draw a picture, show where they felt it, use words, whatever it is. And then of course, ventral vagal, a time when they felt safe, when they felt connected, a time when they felt grounded and like they could be their authentic self and feel like themselves again. I think I've mentioned a lot of people come in saying, I don't feel like myself. And that ventral vagal is a state in which you can feel like yourself. And so then they can map that. The world is safe. You can move through it with ease. This idea of flow, bring this moment to life and let it fill you from your core to your skin. So you're inviting people to have that experience again, and then to kind of examine and be curious about their experience. Okay, this is just kind of a visual of what some of those might look like. Maybe people would draw these little figures or something else, or maybe they would draw kind of a figure and highlight areas where they felt certain things. Yeah, so there you go. Then triggers and glimmers map. So this is, of course, glimmers are where that ventral vagal energy is, where there's the sense of connection and calm and confidence and clarity, because we're now back in prefrontal cortex. And glimmers, I like, that makes me think of the solution focused, of finding those sparkling moments, right? Like, when are things going well? Tell me about that. So glimmers might be feeling seen, feeling connected, feeling like I'm appreciated, feeling safe, feeling trusted, all of these things that are really valuable. And we'll talk some more about those with emotionally focused therapy too. And also remember, this is kind of, it ties back into satir and these yearnings. We all want to feel that way. We want to feel what it feels like to be in this ventral vagal state where we're connected and calm and confident, and we have clarity, and we're like able to feel wanted and appreciated and needed. It just feels great. Okay, then sympathetic nervous. So then the person would write about times or about situations in which they felt that way, glimmers of hope, these sparkling moments. And then, of course, we will try to create more of those. And then sympathetic and dorsal vagal will both be triggers. Not that either of those are wrong, of course, in a context. There are times when we, of course, want to feel a little bit of fear, because it maybe motivates us to do what we need to do. But then we also want to get back to ventral vagal. And so it's when we're stuck in that sympathetic, and when that sympathetic state becomes the overriding state in which we're trying to connect with our spouse or with our children. That's not going to happen. There will not be connection. So what are some triggers? What are some things that get you into that state? Maybe it's feeling disrespected by your spouse or by your children. Maybe it's feeling like you're not trusted. Maybe it is feeling like you are a failure as a person, which then might get also into that dorsal vagal. Feeling unwanted for dorsal vagal, feeling disconnected, feeling worthless, feeling not only not safe maybe, but not worth being safe. So as people can write about what some of their triggers are for being in those various states, now that they kind of are getting a sense in their body of what those states feel like, then that helps them. Again, we're building awareness with these maps. Okay, and then now we've got awareness, we want to know, how do we make changes? So if I'm in a ventral vagal state, what helps me stay in that state? Even maybe given a trigger, if I had a trigger come, but I want to stay in that ventral vagal state, how do I do that? And what helps me stay? And what can I do on my own that helps me stay? What can other people do that helps me stay there? So for example, something I can do on my own that helps me stay in ventral vagal state is get enough sleep at night and get some exercise and eat healthy food. And something that other people can do to help me is maybe my friends, I can go on a walk with my friends. I can call somebody who's safe and just hear their reassuring voice and know that I'm loved. So that kind of helps me get into the window of tolerance, stay in the window of tolerance, also expand my window of tolerance. Often people come in for therapy and their window of tolerance is pretty small. Like it's hard to get into that ventral vagal state and it's hard to stay in the ventral vagal state. But as we talk more about it, give them more experiences, help them identify their other states and what's getting them there, we can hopefully expand that window of tolerance so that they can have positive experiences with their spouse and children and others more frequently and can stay in that ventral vagal window better. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "That which we persist in doing becomes easier to do, not that the nature of the thing has changed, but that our power to do it has increased." So that is true for getting in this ventral vagal state. If we keep working at it and keep trying, which we'll talk more about things that people can do to help them do that, then it gets easier. However, that works for the other states also. So when maybe we kind of have a small window of tolerance and maybe there's something that we feel anxious about, and instead of engaging with it and getting back into the window of tolerance, we avoid it or we ignore it. That's kind of the same as avoid, or we fight it, or whatever it is. Guess what? Those neural pathways are going to be strengthened, and that will be an easier response. And we come up with our coping mechanisms that way, given various contexts. So be aware of that. And as people are talking about, it is so hard to get out of this. Yes, that is something very worth validating. It is hard. We're trying to create new neural pathways. We're engaging neuroplasticity, which means our ability to create new neural pathways, to stimulate neuronal growth, and to be intentional about what we're focusing on and how we're focusing on it. So what moves me out of this sympathetic state? What can I do that moves me out? Maybe that's listen to some music that I love. Maybe it's call a friend. Maybe it is do some deep breathing exercises or some grounding exercises, which we'll talk about later. What can other people do that helps me move out of this state? Maybe if I'm feeling overwhelmed and angry, and maybe I'm biting my husband's head off, and I talked about this with the satir model and these coping stances and blaming, so I'm blaming. But if my husband can stay in his own ventral vagal state, even if I'm blaming, he can help me because he can say, wow, it looks like you're feeling like a failure right now. It looks like this is feeling overwhelming. And just that reflection, him being able to use his prefrontal cortex and use those higher functions and validate me means, oh, I'm safe. that validation means I am seen and heard, I'm safe, and then that gets me back into ventral vagal. Dorsal vagal, the same thing. What makes me shut down, but then also what can I do to get me out of this shutdown state? And what can other people do to help me get out of this shutdown state? Maybe if I am totally shut down and, just kind of walking around slumped over, maybe I need a hug. And that won't solve everything, but it makes if I get a good enough hug, there's some endorphins in my brain. That's great. That helps. So that can help move me out. Maybe if I'm feeling really low, maybe having personal religious practices and reading scripture that says basically you can't be bad enough that God doesn't love you, or something like that could help me move out of the state. So then interventions. What are we going to be doing to help people better self-regulate and connect with compassion to their autonomic nervous system? So I love this. Compassion is such a powerful principle. Compassion for self, compassion for others. And it's really possible in this ventral vagal when we are engaging the full capacities of our mind and our brain and being authentic for self. We can be kind to ourselves even when things feel crazy. So this befriending process brings clients into connection with their autonomic stories with curiosity and not judgment. So we're talking mindfulness here. We're being curious, we're being open, we're not judging. This chapter builds on the 3 maps that we just talked about of the basic mapping series and helps clients explore the art of autonomic awareness through these different things. So that's from the reading. So now people are going to be becoming aware of and being creative with and compassionate with and kind of befriending these various states. So one way to do this is an art map. An art map would be like they can draw what it looks like or color or do a collage or whatever, be creative and artistic about what these various states, autonomic nervous system states, feel like. So for example, maybe in that dorsal vagal state, there is darkness. There's just a lot of darkness. Maybe somebody is drawn hunched over, curled up into fetal position, just miserable. Maybe in the sympathetic nervous state, it's like red, and maybe there's weapons or angry faces or I don't know, whatever. And then maybe as they draw the ventral vagal state, there's smiles and hugs and connection, whatever people can do, be creative. Show and tell, you can use objects that maybe represent various states. So maybe I pull out these little hearts. You can see these hearts. And this represents my ventral vagal because I'm connected and happy. And maybe, I don't know, what else do I have around me? Maybe something else represents I don't know, I'll use scissors. There we go, scissors. This represents my sympathetic because I can cut and run. Or I guess you could use scissors for a weapon. I don't know. And then maybe show and tell for my dorsal vagal would be something black, like this eraser. It's a whiteboard eraser, just like erases all my feelings. It erases all my sense of self. It's just black and terrible. Sand tray. Sand tray is such a fabulous, it's kind of like sculpting with little figurines and art. And so you can do a sand tray where the prompt is something like, show me how it feels to be in the sympathetic nervous system. And so they would pull objects sand tray, that's a whole thing. There's a whole class on sand tray. So anyway, more than I can explain now, but sand tray would pull little objects, kind of like maybe you would use for show and tell, but it would arrange them maybe with a person in the middle, and there would be like lots of kind of pointy objects or swords, or often in a good sand tray collection, there's going to be weaponry and like little soldiers and things like that. So that might be part of what they would do if the prompt was show me what it's like to be in that sympathetic nervous system state. Writing about your rhythm. So writing how it feels. Maybe do a poem about each and the words reflect it. Musical maps. Now, this is so not my talent, but some people have this talent where they could just either create music on the fly. I actually have a friend who you could say, hey, tell us a musical story. And she would come up with like a little theme for whoever is the main character, and then a few other themes, and then like weave them all together. It was amazing. I do not have that talent, but you could create a musical map of, if they have that talent, they could create a piece of music that feels like whatever those nervous system states are, the autonomic nervous system states, or they could compile songs that somebody else created that are reflective of those states and kind of share the experience or live the experience in that way. Moving maps would be like using your body to show. So maybe you would curl up in a ball, or put your arm over your head like this for sympathetic, or arms out like for a hug for parasympathetic. So moving around. And then you guys know about sculpting. You could sculpt yourself, which kind of is like that moving map, or you could use other figurines to sculpt. Okay, so and all of those are again about helping people recognize and kind of befriend or be aware of, without judging and without rejecting any of those states, because all of these states are part of us and they are given to us to help us survive. And so often it's the feeling about the feeling, like we talked about with Satir, that becomes even more problematic. So if I get angry or go into that sympathetic nervous system, and then I shame myself for having gotten mad at my spouse, it's not helpful. I'm not going to move forward that way. But if I can be open and compassionate and befriend myself and those states and recognize, oh, I went into that because of this, and I recognize it now, and just be open to it, then it can be a very different outcome. Okay, so then increasing awareness. So now that we kind of know these states, how can we be aware of them as they come up? And so these various things, and this is from the reading again, are ways that somebody might notice throughout the day and get better at. So they're practicing, they're having this experiential learning where they can practice recognizing the states and noticing them. So notice and name. In interpersonal neurobiology, Siegel talks about name it to tame it. Like if you can recognize it and be open to it, then that state doesn't have such a power over you. So to notice and name is like, oh, I notice that I'm going into work and I'm thinking about, maybe I don't even realize I'm thinking about the presentation that I have to give, but as I'm driving to work, I notice that my heart is pounding a little bit. Maybe my chest is clenching. My throat is tight, and I notice that, oh, I'm getting into that sympathetic nervous system state. Wonder what's going on. Oh, I'm thinking about that presentation. That makes sense. I'm nervous about it. Maybe this is something I'm going to be judged on, and then being able to calm it down. We'll get to the calm it down in a minute. So notice and name it, and then tracking the one on the far left, the 8 a.m., confusing, no plan, feeling lost, don't know where to turn. It's hard to see the X, but it's on one of the lower rungs there. Can't get myself going. So indicating that there's maybe that dorsal vagal, so kind of shut down. And then at noon, I'm in the flow of my day. I'm feeling productive and liking life. Life is good. So that's up higher on the ladder. We're looking at ventral vagal. 3 p.m., too much on my plate. The piles don't get any smaller. I've got meetings after school pickup. There's no food in the house for dinner. How did I get here? How do I get out of here? So we're sympathetic. You can maybe kind of see that middle, the X kind of in the middle. And then 9 o'clock draws kind of this curly Q, made it to the end of the day with enough grace to make it a good day. So back in ventral vagal. So that's the just tracking through the day. Then that soup of the day, you can see kind of noticing different aspects, different states that were part of the day. The ventral vagal, top of my ladder, connection with friends, walking, laughing. Then there was a moment when there was sympathetic nervous system, arguments with Jay, whoever that is. I was angry, I walked away mad. Dorsal vagal, I dropped into this feeling disconnected and alone. Then back to ventral vagal because I had time with my kids. I felt connected, I felt appreciated and loved. That got me back into that ventral vagal that then allowed me to be inside my window of tolerance. And so maybe I apologized, or it looks like maybe that the child or Jay, whoever that is, apologized. So things are good. And then almost ventral vagal again, family dinner feels comfortable. Maybe there was still some stress from making dinner, so it wasn't quite ventral vagal. So all of these different sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system states kind of go into the ingredients for the soup. And that day it was ventral vagal gumbo because there were 3 ventral or almost ventral vagal times. And then the one on the right there is tracking again, but it's just a little bit more tracking. So kind of starts in the middle, agitated, angry, saw the girls mess in the playroom, then had coffee on the deck in the sun. So I'm feeling happy and calm. Got to walk in with the dog and a neighbor. So we're up at ventral vagal, feeling brainy and competent, writing on the deck, in the flow, ventral vagal. Then around lunchtime, rushed, agitated, maybe was enjoying the flow so much she lost track of time. I'm running late, I need to shower. So in that sympathetic, feeling kind of unsettled and uncertain. I just met with a contractor trying to figure out costs. Then back up to ventral vagal, connecting, and then down again, rushed. So that rush sense of, there's something that's dangerous. I might not be there in time. Somebody might feel dismissed or whatever. There's some relational tension. So that goes back on to sympathetic. Okay, so then once we are good at recognizing, tracking, knowing, befriending all of these, then we also want to improve self-regulation. So there's a lot of ways to improve self-regulation. And this idea of improving self-regulation, I want to point out, pulls through a lot of these models. Differentiation, back to Bowen, that's about self-regulation. Structural, being able to be flexible and in the flow, to have enough structure, but to also be flexible. That means we're going to be in our window of tolerance. It's when we get stuck outside of that window of tolerance that we start to get rigid. So again, we're looking at ventral vagal. We want to be in that window of tolerance. In structural, in solution focused, when are you a ventral vagal? When are things going well? Let's increase that. And increasing that is things that are going to improve self-regulation. Telling your story and having your story not mean you're a failure, and not mean that everything is bad, but instead having a story in which things are possible and hopeful and can be safe, and there's still possibilities ahead of you. That's going to be moving out of some of that sympathetic or even dorsal vagal state and into ventral vagal as we're regulating. And then of course with Virginia Satir, she looked at this pretty directly with getting to that authentic self, which is ventral vagal, being able to be connected, to be in the higher order or higher brain functioning, prefrontal cortex, connecting internally, connecting externally. All of those things are also about what's going on with our autonomic nervous system, according to polyvagal theory, and our ability to self-regulate. So breathing exercises. You guys probably know breathing exercises. This is kind of a zeitgeist, the mood of the day or the spirit of the time of mindfulness and breathing and good thing. There's a lot of different possible breathing exercises. There can be breathing exercises where you mostly slow down your breathing. And this is one of the important things that we've learned, is that our autonomic nervous system is not only reactive. We don't only react. We can be intentional about the mechanisms that are connected, and then change what's going on for us because of intentional practices. So, like, for example, one of the things, our vagus nerve, we have 20%, and I'm going to get the names of these wrong, but 20% I think are afferent, which means sending signals from our brain out to our various body organs. And 80% are actually sending signals from our organs to our brain. And that's important because our brain is interpreting things and wants to know what's going on. So if we are intentional about slowing down our breath, that will send a signal up to our brain. Things are safe, things are calm. And that can be really powerful. So those breathing exercises, slowing down the breath, maybe counting inhales and exhales, can do a lot to help regulate and help bring us back into that ventral vagal state, into that calm, safe state. Grounding exercises. There's lots of these too. Grounding exercises are like being present in the moment. So a well-known grounding exercise is 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Notice 5 things you can see, and you're just going to notice them, not judge, just notice, be curious. So 5 things I can see. I see a picture of my children. I see a lamp reflecting the light of the window. I see a box full of pens. I see the white desk in front of me, and I see these little hearts that I showed you. So those are 5 things that I see. And then maybe 4 things that I hear. And then maybe 3 things that or maybe it's 4 things that I can touch, that I feel. So I can feel like the back of a spiral notebook. I feel this ribbon here. I feel the roughness of the top of my desk. I feel the arm of the chair. 3 things that I hear, 2 things that I smell, 1 thing that I taste. So it's just, grounding is about being in the present moment and kind of reaffirming to yourself, this is the moment that I'm in, and this moment is a safe moment, and so I can calm down. Imagery exercises. There's lots of fabulous imagery exercises too. One of the favorite imagery exercises, or one that I do a fair amount, is called safe space imagery, in which you envision a place that feels completely safe. And it can be a totally made up place, or it can be a place that you know well. It should not be a place where anything bad has ever happened, or where there is any shame or hurt or pain or anything like that. People have talked about creating a space in their mind in which there is like all of their favorite things. So there's pink cotton candy, and there's their favorite stuffed animal from childhood, and there's their baby blanket, and their favorite food, like all of these things, just all their favorites. Or a lot of times people like to envision an outdoor scene, something that's beautiful, and nature has nature all around. And then part of that safe space imagery is kind of to do the same grounding exercises, but to just kind of be present in that image. So what do you see? What do you hear? What do you smell? What do you taste? What do you touch? And then also, how does it feel inside? So doing that interoception of safety. How does it feel to be in this place? And then imagining kind of encapsulating this place and bringing it inside and recognizing this safe space is mine, and it's part of me, and it's created by me, and is something about me. This safe space is mine. Okay, vocal exercises. This can be a number of different things. Helping people recognize how different tones of voice affect them. Sometimes I will do and this is more of an interpersonal neurobiology thing, but an experiential learning where I will ask people to just pay attention to how they feel inside. And then I'll repeat the word no 5 times loudly. And sometimes this is quite uncomfortable for people. I've had younger children, like if I'm working with a family, younger children just kind of start to laugh, which is a very normal response to something that's uncomfortable, that they're not sure what to make of. And then, so we talk about how does that feel? And people feel kind of shut down, disconnected. And then again, have them pay attention to how they're feeling and repeat yes in a loving, open tone, as much as I can do that. And then how does that feel? So recognizing kind of how the prosody, how we hear things in the vocal. Other vocal exercises include making sounds ourselves. So in the kind of classic, meditation, om, and that sense of kind of vibration through the whole body can be powerful. Oh, I'm not quite ready to click over there. Body movement exercises. This can be things like yoga. It could be just stretching, just, that feels so good. And of course, you don't stretch like that unless you're safe. So giving a big stretch feels, can kind of be a hack for your autonomic nervous system and give this sense of safety. Another thing you can do, it's called power poses. So just sitting like this with your hands behind your back, or standing up tall with your fists on your hips, like kind of Wonder Woman pose. Those, if you hold that pose for a while, also will give you this sense of everything's okay. I'm in control. So it's this lovely hack for our physiology. Savoring exercises. So we notice a lot of things, but our brain tends to tune out things. In fact, our brain has to tune out things because we can't pay attention to everything at the same time. And so often what we tune out, we tune this out because it is not necessary for survival to notice it. And that's how our brain works, with the top priority, especially on autopilot, is to notice what's going to keep us alive. So what we often don't notice is what's just really lovely. There's an exercise I call penny pleasures. And penny pleasures is about noticing small, lovely things, like picking up a penny. Usually we don't actually, like, a penny on the sidewalk is kind of dirty. I probably wouldn't pick up a penny I saw on the sidewalk. If you're a small child, you probably would pick up a penny and feel like it was a treasure. But as we get older, for whatever reason, it's just worth less and less. And it turns out that's kind of the same thing for noticing and savoring positive experiences. A kid will notice and savor the sensation of the carpet and like each little toy and just be super focused and in the zone and just really enjoying it, where an adult will often tune all that out. So penny pleasures is about noticing the little beautiful things and taking time to savor them. So for example, I'm looking out my window right now and I see the mountain range white with snow and the sunlight on it, and it's just beautiful. And I could just take a minute to just marvel and have awe and enjoy, savor that beauty. Or we can also savor a good meal. Just eat it slowly and choose to be aware of each bite and to enjoy each bite. Anyway, so that's savoring. Playfulness. Playfulness is kind of like what I just said about kids. You know, as grown-ups, we often think we don't have time for playfulness, and maybe playfulness sounds immature, but when we still have those parts of us that long for playfulness and that are able to be playful, and maybe if you have kids, you notice being able to be playful with them. I actually am more playful with my husband, I think, than my kids sometimes. But you know, just kind of being happy, being in the flow, enjoying what's going on. And in the reading, it shares various ideas for playfulness. Creativity, also being able to express that creativity within you. And so that might mean doing something artistic. It might mean doing something musical, like whatever it is. Or maybe it means, for me, sewing masks, or and I don't get to do that very often, but I have enjoyed that this year, pulling out my sewing machine and doing some sewing. Also crochet. I like to do crochet. So just creating something that wasn't there before and just really enjoying that experience. And then kindness. Of course, if we are in the state to be kind, then we're safe and we have energy and resources to give. That's what kindness is about. And even if that energy and resource is just a smile or a prayer or a kind thought or something like that. And so if we can do that and choose to do that, we are signaling to ourselves and to our brain, I am safe, I have what I need. And that's a pretty powerful signal for getting us into that ventral vagal state. Another practice that we can do that maybe you guys have heard of or are familiar with is the loving kindness meditation. And that can be a powerful one also for creating within ourselves a sense of safety and also a sense of compassion for ourselves and for others. So there's lots of loving kindness meditations. There's not a right or wrong, but there's a pattern. And the pattern is usually to start with self, although sometimes people, especially if they're in that dorsal vagal, really shut down, really have a lot of shame, it's very difficult to extend compassion to self. So, the pattern is usually to start with self and to say kind things like, may I have peace, may I have health, may I have healing, may I feel calm and connected. And so you repeat those several times. And then you say the same things with a person that you love, that you feel connected to in mind. Maybe it's a spouse or a good friend or a sibling or a parent or somebody that you love. May you have peace. May you have calm and connection. May you have healing. And then you think of somebody that is hard to love, that does not feel very safe. And again, extend those same desires for that person, thinking of that person. May you have peace. May you have healing. May you have calm and connection. And then the last is you extend that kindness, that loving kindness, to everyone in the world. And so you may say, may all beings have calm. May all beings have peace. May all beings have healing. May all beings have kindness and connection. Whatever. I've changed it every single time and usually use the same words every time, but I was just coming up with it off the top of my head. Anyway, so those are some interventions that could be used for self-regulation. Here's one more. I'm not going to do this with you. It's about a 20-minute practice usually. It's called the Wheel of Awareness. And this again comes from Interpersonal Neurobiology, Dan Siegel. And there is a link in your schedule for this week. It's under the bonus for the Wheel of Awareness practice. So if there is some time this week that you want to just relax, that you feel like you need to do some self-care, some self-regulation, this would be a good one to do then. There's nothing you have to learn from it, just do the practice. So then the next question is, at least for me, how do we apply all of this in, that's the end of the slideshow. I'm going to stop sharing. So how do we apply all of this when there's multiple people in the room? And like I have said, kind of talked about how this impacts connection and relationships, but really helping each of the people who are there for therapy understand themselves and understand the other person and what's going on. So you're going to do some of that awareness building, some of that befriending, some of the self-regulation, and then helping the couple get into that ventral vagal state, be in that window of tolerance as they are talking about what's going on for them. And as much as they can stay in it, they are likely to learn and to connect. And that can be a powerful experience again. And so for me, I use this in conjunction with other theories. I integrate it. And so we talk about these things. And then I may use some emotionally focused therapy or some internal family systems models also to help the family come together or to help the couple come together and kind of find their pattern. What's going on when their cycle is playing out? What's going on in the various interactions? Why are they responding the way they are? How would they like to respond? Can they tell the other person that they would rather respond in this loving, connected way, even when they've been defensive or angry or blaming? So those can be really important experiential opportunities. A quick case study, I don't have a picture for you, but case study could be a couple comes in where the wife maybe really wants to connect emotionally and the husband is quite shut down. I said, I've sometimes had people come in where they won't make eye contact with me, or they just seem really like kind of hunched over, kind of zoned out. So we can imagine Jane and John. And Jane really wants to connect. And Jane says, I wish you would talk to me more. I wish you'd tell me about how you're feeling. I wish you would not gaslight me, which means when I say, are you mad at me? You wouldn't say no, even though you are mad at me, because I can tell you're mad at me because your body language is showing me that you're mad at me. And then you walk away and you shut down or you yell, but you tell me you're not mad at me. That's really frustrating. And then John maybe doesn't want to make eye contact with me as a therapist, but maybe would make eye contact with the wife and say something like, no, I'm not angry. And it doesn't help to tell you about how I'm feeling, because then that just makes you be more emotional. And then it's harder for me to deal with. And so I'd rather just handle my emotions on my own. And I don't want to tell you about it. So clearly, wife is in sympathetic nervous system state, husband is in dorsal vagal and kind of shut down, and feels like being shut down is the way to handle things. Shut down with his wife, it's like there's that plexiglass, And so helping them both get into ventral vagal state will be really important. Now, with somebody who's really shut down, this can take a while, and it takes kind of some meta work. So I noticed this being immediate in session. I noticed that you don't make eye contact with me. And I noticed that you're kind of hunched over. And I notice that when your wife says this, it's even harder for you to look at her. And I wonder what's going on. How does it feel? And maybe there's no words for the emotions. Like maybe he can't say, I feel hopeless and sad and scared. Maybe he doesn't have those words, and I see that a fair amount. Like people just don't even have feeling words. So maybe how does it feel in your body? And so then helping the husband identify the autonomic nervous system state that he's in. Maybe he says, my stomach hurts, and maybe there's tightness in my throat, and I almost feel like I can't talk. And that's what he notices, and he hasn't put emotion words to that. So then helping both of the spouses go through that map. Okay, this is how I feel, and this is what's going on. This is my dorsal vagal state. I am shut down. I have withdrawn. I am numb. I mean, maybe he can say how he's feeling, but like he doesn't want to feel it. He'll push it away. And so that kind of creates this numbness. And then here's what it's like when I'm in sympathetic nervous system. Maybe sometimes, and this is maybe wife reports, maybe Jane reports, well, at home, he's not this shut down. At home, he yells and throws things and still says he's not angry. So then we're going to get into sympathetic nervous system, and what does it feel like to be in that state? How does defensive feel? And then finally, what are some times when you actually do feel calm and connected? What are some glimmers? What are some times that you can think of that things were going well and you felt happy and like yourself? And what did that feel like in your body? And how can we replicate that? So then helping them walk through that, understand themselves, understand what's going on for the other person. And with this model, you don't have to go back in time necessarily. About like why, for example, does talking about emotions shut you down? Or why does your wife saying she wants to see you more and she wants to understand you more shut you down from the past? But it would be possible to talk about in the present, like what does that mean to you? Well, my wife is telling me that she wants more from me than I'm giving. That means that I'm a bad husband. I'm a failure. And so then I just feel hopeless. I feel like I'll never be enough. And I shut down. And there's a lot of shame there. And probably somebody like John in this example wouldn't have the words for that, but you could help them see and kind of slowly, again, we go slow in therapy, slowly deepen what is your wife's behavior and your behavior, and what's going on underneath that. What do you want, and what are you afraid of, and what are the feelings, all of these things. So that's it for this week. I am just looking at the time and it looks like I've gone quite long. Of course, you can always have sped these videos up. And I hope you learned something, and I hope you will bring more questions to the lab, and I'll look forward to hearing from you in the digital dialogue also.